Hey, hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Where's Your Heart? We appreciate all of your viewership, everybody chiming in, listening. This is the place where we champion courageous vulnerability as a core human strength. As always, we got the man 20 grand, my man, I think you got a new nickname.
All right, so this is hilarious. So our our guest, one of our guests called me the Royce, and this is hilarious to me because there's a totally separate group of friends who one of my friends started calling me the Royce in, and I don't know what that is about, but I'm just gonna roll with it. And thank you,
Why not, man? Why not? Why not? Why not?
because I am uncomfortable with praise. That's why not.
Oh, come on, man. You got this. You got this, bro. You got this. You got this. You got this. How you feeling?
Oh, it's been a day, dude. I mean, so when we talk about gratitude, today we went to the vet, and one of our dogs has lived a wonderful life, and it was time for him to be done, and
Oh
so
no.
we put him to sleep. And so I'm sitting in gratitude for like 12 years with this amazing, adorable little. He was the sweetest puppy. Like, he never stopped being a puppy, and he was just one of those dogs that was just had this sweet, sweet temperament.
Okay.
Could not train him on a whole bunch of stuff. There was a whole bunch of him that was unique. But yeah, just one of those heart moments. And so I'm grateful that for the way my family does grief. I'm grateful for the way we hold space for each other.
Hmm.
Only my son and Sarah were allowed to go into the vet thing, but they brought me in live feed, like, just so yeah, lots
Okay.
to be thankful for there
Okay.
and to be able to be present. Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate you sharing, man. I
Mm.
I know I keep looking away at the camera. This
Right?
production and trying to do a whole bunch of things at once is becoming very interesting. But yeah,
I'm gonna
man.
look away now.
Do
So
your thing.
go.
Do your
I'm
thing. Do your
listening
thing.
now.
I'm going to combine like last week now in gratitude for me. So real quick, this is a very interesting week for me. So within a 48-hour period, I really spent my time on the north side of Chicago. A really good friend of mine, a brother of mine, actually where I rent office space, and we were out. We were on this boat, just hanging out. Right, we're
Mhm.
going into the Chicago River. On this huge boat, just enjoying life. Just perfect day in Chicago. It wasn't hot. It wasn't cold. And this is very rare for the Chicagoland area. We're passing the Trump building. We're doing all this stuff, and I was really reflecting on like that side of life and just being appreciative of
Yeah.
having access to these types of things because it is a privilege, and I recognize that. But then the next day, I went with my cousin who eventually we'll have on the show. He was a professional basketball player for a really long time, and he was like, "Hey, um, there are certain sides of your family that you don't know because my mom kind of um, I don't want to say kept us away, but kind of separated us, right, in the growing up
Yeah.
process." And so, without getting into the specifics, because I really can't, but this person is involved pretty influentially and high up in the Chicago gang. But we were celebrating his birthday, and it was just interesting in that, again, without getting into specifics, because this is a very real situation. We were in Inglewood, which is where a lot of my family's from, actually on both sides, my mom and my dad, and it's pretty much where people are hearing a lot of negativity and things that are going on in the Chicagoland area. And so I was
Yeah.
just sitting there like, man, it's within 24 hours, you have like over 100 people. Definitely a different type of life. I never felt uncomfortable. 100%, welcome. I mean, I was related to a third of the people that were there, but I was just really grateful for the opportunity to have a wide perspective of
Yeah.
experiences in life and feel comfortable in different types of situations. I mean, I was at home with both,
Mhm.
appreciative of both, but I had to acknowledge the variance in them, right? And just being able to kind of navigate in different environments and stuff. So I'm grateful for that. So what I hope to do is to be able to bring a piece of all of these environments and centered around gratitude to wherever I show up. So that was last week, and it's what I'm grateful for right now. So that's it, man. That's it. Yeah,
That's huge.
yeah, bro. Yeah, it's good to
Like,
see my people. It really
yeah.
was. It really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about the shirt. You normally don't wear graphics on your shirt.
Ice
I'm
Cube?
always. Oh, is this?
What?
I couldn't
That's
see.
Ice Cube, man. Yeah,
Are
this is.
you
I mean, I'm.
serious?
Yeah, that's Ice
That's
Cube. Old school hip
long.
hop.
Yeah, old
Old school
school.
hip hop. Grew up listening to Ice Cube. America's Most Wanted is one of my favorite albums. I think every human being should listen to that, especially right now. I know he's
Mm,
and one of the things that I appreciate about Ice Cube is he's been consistent, right? The narrative that he has right now. Ice Cube has been saying this 20 years ago, 25 years
yeah,
ago in different ways, whether it be through his music, through different things that he's written, people that he's partnered with. But what I also love about Ice Cube, and a lot of people kind of forget this, is that he had about a decade span of creating family movies, and they did extremely
yeah,
well. They crossed out of just the Native Black American community to where you had people from every different types of background in the United States looking at his
yeah,
stuff. And I like the way, kind of going back to what we talked about before, his ability to be able to navigate like that and still
yeah.
never sell his soul. So
I
I
was gonna
appreciate
say
that. Yeah.
integrity. That's what
Integrity.
I think of with him. Is like, uh, yeah, like you said. I know that he has changed. I know
Hmm.
that I don't know. I haven't followed him nearly as closely as what
Hmm.
you're talking about. Like,
Hmm.
is that an album cover? I'm guessing,
Yeah, I
or
think
is that
this is not America's Most Wanted. I can't remember. I know it's not America's Most Wanted. This
okay?
was one of his. I think it was the album where Today Was a Good Day was on. I'm not sure. I'm sure some people in the comments will be
Yeah,
able to
somebody's
correct me. I'm
gonna.
going to look. Let me look right now because I'm sure somebody will chime in on that. Oh,
But
there's Aaron. What's up,
but
Aaron?
that really is something cool about him. That I, even not following him, I see that, and he's one of those people that I love the way he uses also his public voice.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen him speak several times where he's just like, this has to be taken care of, and it just, yeah,
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
yeah,
So we got a few people chiming in. We got
yeah.
Aaron Jackson, one of my fraternity brothers, 586 Fraternity Incorporated, actually one of my chapter brothers too, chiming in saying true and then talking about, culture for service and service for humanity. Got to give
Mm.
him a shout out. How you feeling, man?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, this is the day. I, I,
I probably asked you
okay.
this question like 5 times throughout the day,
It's true. All
expecting a
right.
different answer.
So here's the funny part. When we started the show and we had that second segment called Last Week Today, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
Last
Last
Week
week
Now.
now. Mm-hmm.
Um, I I I had been reading news, like I read news normally constantly.
Mm.
And but like 2 weeks ago, I took Facebook off my phone and largely stopped reading news constantly because I'm so tired of it. Um, and it's nuts because I'm kind of a junkie about it.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm like, last week now, like what happened in the last week? Because it just feels like, oh, okay, I'll tell you what happened in the last week. I had, I think, 5 different people in my circles say I have clinical depression right now,
Wow.
and it's fucking my world up.
Wow.
Every single one of them is a person of color. Like, eh, and I'm not saying that it doesn't affect that depression isn't affecting white folks right now. I'm just suggesting that it struck me that this is the pattern, and we're at that phase of isolation where yeah, this is real.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think
to,
as a person
those
who
are the
identifies as a Native Black American, it's compounding on top of the things that
oh God,
have
yeah.
become normalized in our life anyway.
Oh, and now we're
Um,
gonna tear this shit open right in front of you. So if you weren't
yeah,
thinking about it and you thought you'd like found some space from it, we're gonna fucking shit all over it right now
yeah,
too. Like, let's
yeah,
be clear.
yeah, yeah. And it's a lot, man. It's a lot. I'm like you. I purposely don't chime into the news. I do get a few things that I like to look at just so I can hear differing opinions and stuff like that. But I have a window of consumption. I actually literally call it, what is my window of consumption for this?
That's a good call.
And I usually do it about 30 minutes every day where I watch a variety of different things and try not to form any type of opinion or anything. Just absorb it, take it in, think
Yeah.
around it, and then keep moving with something positive. So that's about it, man. But that's kind of how we circle back when we were talking about our last few shows. We were talking about how impactful
Yeah.
one particular show was. I mean, all of them have been, but the feedback that we gotten on colorism was good. So that fueled a lot of the conversation that we're going to be having today.
So before we get to introducing our guests, let's
Yeah.
make sure everyone please share this, start a watch party. do us a huge favor, go to YouTube and either watch it on YouTube or share it off of YouTube, as we try to focus our stuff over onto a platform that is a little more independent and a little more flexible for us. It'd be really great. So and throw comments up there if you want, or whatever. We see all the comments right here from all those live streams.
And I am trying to do the exact thing.
Oh, you're doing it.
Well, I've done it. However, it's difficult because try to do it on multiple places, and it doesn't always let you do it. So, so when I look away from the camera, that is what I'm doing. I'm actually sharing at that moment.
All right. So, are we ready?
I think we're ready, man. Let's
diving in.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's dive in. Let's dive in. So we had our conversation around colorism, where we had two really amazing guests that were on, and so we wanted to circle back. We got a lot of great feedback during the show, but then also after the show, and people were like, "Hey, I think you need to dive in a little bit more." So of course we're like, "Got you. We'll bring it back, and we'll make sure that we bring on more awesome guests." So I would like to introduce one of our guests. Amazing human being. She's going to go a lot into her background and some of the things that she's been able to do over her life, but she's currently the CEO for Washington STEM. She's going to elaborate a little bit more on that, but then also for the Black Future Co-op Fund, which is a fund that she's going to talk a little bit about when she gets on the show, that actually centers around financing and putting money into certain communities. But just an amazing human being. I mean, when she responded to some of our answers, when she talked about things around her history and how she shows up, I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be such a great show. She also has a few places where if you want to find her online, she's at CEO at ARJ across all media platforms. And just can't wait to hear this conversation. So that being said, I want to call her the Honorable. I think she liked that, but I'm not going to say it right now. Miss
I'm just going to call her Dr. Jones.
But I can hear you. Hello, Torian and the Royce.
Hey. The Royce.
Welcome.
Royce.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's weird to be on this side. I'm used to just hiding in the chat and just giving my comments in. So it's kind of weird to be on camera and see myself at the same time.
We got you.
But we're so glad you are, like in both places, like when you're commenting and when you're here, like it's just, it means a lot to us to get to have these conversations with folks. So thank you.
Well, thank you for just doing this. We have a responsibility, right? So you guys do this every Monday.
Every Monday.
Thank you.
Every Monday.
It's true.
Every single Monday. Yes.
So that responsibility. So that actually is how I want to introduce our another guest here. So one of my like burned in memories of this person is from the night that Obama was elected president. Because she spent that night with my family, who is very white. I am probably the most person of color in my family. No. Okay. But like that. So for her to spend that night with us, and I remember at one point she looked over and said, "Oh my God, I'm going to catch shit for doing this, for not spending time in the Black community tonight of all nights." But it led to this conversation that Torian and I ended up having too, of just the how many folks remember where they were that night? Like what a lightning strike moment it was. You know, there's one, people mentioned JFK's assassination, remembering that, MLK's assassination. Like, so, but this one, to have such a positive one that, you know, we remember what we were doing that night. And so this is my friend, a friend from seminary, which is always fun because I'm an atheist now, so all my seminary friends don't know how the hell this works.
Yeah, we got to get into that.
Yeah, we will. But this is Reverend Michelle Freeman.
Hey,
get her up in here.
Hey,
there she is.
Ready to rock and roll. How you doing, Reverend Freeman?
I'm blessed.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on the show. Is it nice and cool in your room?
Don't go there.
That's messed up, Torian.
and choke you. Don't go there.
She's like, I'm gonna choke you out. Ugh!
And you made me turn my fan off because you said you go ask.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Whew. So as you can tell, we have a lot of fun
Oh,
off camera on the show as well. Well, seriously, thank both of you all for coming on the show, for tuning in, for listening, and just really spending your time with this topic and sharing. Because the whole premise of the show is really to champion vulnerability as a core human strength. So I know it takes a lot just to come on and talk about some of the things we're going to talk about, specifically around colorism. So I'll just throw it out there as a general topic. So can you give the viewers and the listeners a little bit of context as to your backgrounds?
You first,
all right.
Angela.
Okay. Well, Torian, I think you already mentioned I'm the CEO of Washington STEM. And, what that means is in Washington State, where I live in Seattle, we are a high tech state, home of Microsoft, home of Amazon. I mean, tech is any tech company you could think of is here and is a hub. But we're 46 in the country for our kids actually going and getting something besides a high school diploma. And so our kids can't actually compete for those STEM sector jobs. And those are the jobs that we say are family sustaining. And when you look at who's not going after those jobs, it's kids of color, it's kids in rural communities, kids living in low income environments, and girls. So my team works on education reform. We do policy, we do advocacy. And I was joking around in the pre-show. I just kind of do anything related to racial justice. If you want to convene me to do something, I got it, and I will make STEM fit in there in some form or shape, because it's just so important to me to figure out how we have not just economic mobility, but long-term sustainability for our people. So that's my day job. Do you want me to talk about my passion job?
Yes,
The
you talk
co-op?
about whatever you like. This is all your platform, at least for the
Okay.
next 45 minutes. You got it.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the Black Future Co-op Fund, and that fund actually, the catalyst for that was just around knowing that in the state of Washington, we're only about 4% of the population, but we matter. And so we were talking about how, as I sit at these tables around policy and advocacy, sit at these corporate tables, we are not there. And so how do we come together and create a Black agenda? We won't necessarily agree on everything, but there might be 5 points we agree on that as a state, a Black community state, that we move forward with. And so we were talking, saying, how do we resource this? Well, it just sped up even more after George Floyd's murder, where I basically, was like, I'm done playing. Tired of waiting on who's next. We know that we can harken back to everybody who walked with Martin Luther King, but who, other people need to pick up the mantle and move forward with it. And so that's one of the things where a couple of friends and I were texting each other, and we're like, you know what, we're going to figure out how to resource this. And so we have a $25 million campaign that we launched the end of June. We've got $6 million in the door, and that money will be used to connect all the communities, Black communities in the state of Washington. And then we're doing focus groups right now to march through and say, what does your community need in this county? What about the 1% of you in this county? So finding out the themes as a collective, and then making investment decisions, not competitive grants, because that's white philanthropy, but investment decisions by Blacks for Blacks that's sustainable. So that's my passion project right now. And other cities have reached out to us and said, how did you do this? And can we borrow the idea? And we're like, sure, go for it.
Do it, please.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Michelle, somebody asked if you could turn up your mic. I don't know what changed.
I did that all the way. Is that any better?
It's a little better. Which mic are you using? You using the one on your computer, or is it your Beats?
I turned the computer all the way up.
There we go.
How's that?
There we go.
Yes.
You did it.
Yes.
Yay. Thank you, my friend.
Yes.
No problem.
So one of the fascinating things about Michelle to me is that she serves in a lot of white spaces.
Okay.
So dive in, friend.
Yes.
Okay. I am a Austin, Texas native, Reverend Michelle Freeman. I have been in ordained ministry for almost 3 years. I have been in ministry for about 22 years. Um, I, as Royce just said, I am often in white spaces. Um, my wife and I, Reverend Georgia Chambers, both grew up in Austin, Texas, which changes our experience of how we see the world. We went to desegregated schools. We had the privilege of getting excellent educations because of that, but of course, it left us with isolating feelings around who we are.
Mm.
Yeah.
We're proud Black women, but as I've told Royce, in the Black community, we're too white, and in the white community, we're too Black.
Hmm.
Um, she is currently living in Evansville, Indiana, southern Indiana, very much, it's a city, but it's in the middle of nowhere, and it is mostly white people.
Mm.
As a hospital trauma chaplain, she's primarily around white people all the time. I am now on my second pastorate. My first pastorate was to an all white, wealthy, affluent congregation in rural southeast Wisconsin, about 30 minutes north of Milwaukee. So I did that for 2 years. A Black queer woman from the deep South comes and pastors an all white congregation in a very wealthy, very red area.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'm now, since late April, I was called as the senior pastor of First Congregational Church in Riverside, which is probably about 65% white, and but has some different cultures in it. So I'm not totally the only Black in the room, but commonly I am, and I'm embraced because of who I am.
Hmm.
It's interesting, in the Black church of my growing up, which was the Missionary Baptist churches in Central Texas. It don't get more conservative than that. But in that space, I wasn't accepted because I was a loud, boisterous Black woman. We were supposed to stay quiet. And they definitely would have never accepted my orientation as an all gender woman in a same gender marriage. They would have never accepted. But in the white community, I got too much soul. So often Georgia and I don't fit in different spaces, but we feel that God has called us to be in those primarily cross-cultural spaces because someone has to do the work. And it helps when you're able to do it with honesty and integrity and have your whole identity affirmed. That's where I'm at right now. And I love the community that I'm in. I'm actually finally able to preach justice oriented womanist messages.
Hmm.
That's something I could not do in Southeast Wisconsin. Um,
Yeah.
so I like to say God has jokes, but God is intentional. God has placed us. But Royce is right. I am commonly in cross-cultural spaces, but someone has to do the work. And God said, I want you to do it. And I do point it back to my upbringing in Austin, Texas, which is not metro, which is not urban. It's a very different type of city. I didn't grow up in the hood or in the ghetto. That's not our experience.
Yeah.
Hmm.
A little bit about me.
Lots here.
There's a lot here. There's a lot here.
Do you have a question teed up, Torian?
A lot of questions, but I actually want to dig a little bit into what we have been talking about just as a group for a while. Just the topic of colorism in your background, right?
Yeah.
Can you all talk a little bit about how colorism specifically has shown up and really how you feel about it and how you've navigated different spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up, I am half Filipina, half black. So my mom is from the Philippines, and my dad grew up in segregated Arkansas. In fact, my family is watching me, but they're also texting me their comments instead of putting it in the chat. So my dad,
I'm getting some of that too. I'm getting a lot of text messages
yeah,
myself.
Reverend Michelle, my dad said you are living his story. He was so happy to hear you talk about your experience. And so, he that was a text that came through. He came up, he was the kid that lived in segregated Arkansas but liked to listen to, Victory at Sea. I was like, how are you listening
Oh,
to classical music? And he just didn't quite fit. People said he wasn't black enough. And so,
Angela,
he went out. Yes,
Angela,
yes.
say that one more time. I lost y'all for a
Oh, okay. He was just saying that the way you told your story, he said she's living my story, and he really appreciated hearing it. He sent me a text
oh,
message.
Hmm.
my pleasure.
Yeah, came through on my computer. So, but again, there, being Filipino and black, my dad's experience was racism. My mom's experience was classism, and I hadn't really thought about it. It was also colorism because in the Philippines, they want you to wear an umbrella, stay out of the sun, stay lighter, and she definitely is lighter. And thinking about my kids are all three different shades of brown, with my youngest being super light, almost like I actually had to ask him, like, how do you identify? Because he's white, Filipino, and black. And he
Yeah.
said, well, I identify as black. He was being raised by his black mom. He's like, I identify as black. I'm like, okay, like, hopefully, I might have to stand beside you for a while. Because that's the challenge our people, face from each other, not and from the white power structure.
yeah.
And so when I went to college, I was moving into the dorms. I walked in the elevator freshman year, so excited, and the doors closed. And this other sister's in the elevator with me, and she says, what are you? I said, oh, I'm a freshman. And she was like, no, what are you? And I was like, oh, I'm a first year student. I'm a freshman. I'm just moving in. She was like, what are you? You're something else. I can see it in your eyes. And I was like, well, dang, like, welcome to college, I guess. And she wanted to know, like, she's like, you're mixed, which I can't stand the term mixed. I'm like, I'm biracial, I'm multiracial. I'm not mixed. I'm not confused. I know exactly what I am. I'm comfortable with what I am. And it's a shame that I have to help you be comfortable with what I am. Today my hair is blown out because I like to wear hats. Tomorrow, you could call me or FaceTime me and it's gonna be curly. Am I, is my blackness, related on my hair on the scale of what's good and what's not? So those are the challenges I face. You don't talk black enough. I'm like, give me a minute. I'm gonna code switch in a second. I'm gonna let my backbone show. You get the CEO voice right now, but make me mad and see what happens.
So
Or if go
I'm sorry.
ahead.
So when you say that though, do you feel that you get that more from people who identify as being Native Black Americans, or just within the Black community and externally, you get
Yeah.
this level of colorism all the way around?
I get that mostly from my own people, but I'm also not Filipina enough
Mm.
Yeah.
because I'm so brown. So they see it in my eyes, which when I go to the Philippines, they'll look at me and go, oh, you're Filipino. I'm like, yeah. There's something in my face that they see and they recognize, but it's still not enough. I was physically assaulted in the Philippines when I was there visiting, for being an American. And that was
Oh,
like really
Wow.
hurtful. Like, wow, like my mom's like whole family, like we're here. And so, it's those things that were created. But I feel more hurt, I think, from black people who do that to me, especially if I walk into a room with a bunch of sisters. There tends to be that one sister who gives me a look like, why are you here?
Mm.
And then I have to make myself comfortable in that space when it's like we all are the most beautiful shades. Like, if anybody like confuses Africa for a country, it's like, no. And we're all over the place. Like,
yeah.
yes, the slave trade did some things, but we come from everywhere
Oh yeah.
across this
Yeah.
globe.
Well, I had that
So
same when I lived in Nigeria. I didn't know that Sade Adu was Nigerian, and I went to a place where, I mean, they were so light skinned. I was like, "What is this?" Right? I was going through my own challenge of being Native Black American and being dark skinned and living and working around people who look like me. I'll be honest, that was one of the first 2 months, first 60 days was one of the most difficult periods of my life because I've been so conditioned to live in society that was majority, especially growing up a large part of my upbringing in the suburbs, to where everyone was as dark or as darker than me. And then I grew up to the northern part, and I'm like, well, hold on a second. So my brain had to switch and go back and forth. But so I definitely kind of understand what you're
Yeah.
saying and identify with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about for you, Michelle?
Uh, yeah. And the part of being too black or too quote unquote Oreo comes up a lot in our
Mm,
community. But a specific incident that really bothered me, we moved from Austin to Dallas in the Dallas Fort Worth area, lived there for about 2.5 years. Did not like it. Subsequently left there and moved to Houston. Houston is now more purple, leaning more towards blue than red. Um, but at the time when we moved there, it was pretty much 50-50, whereas Dallas is very red.
mhm,
And so we moved there and we move into this area that's primarily very, it's primarily affluent, upper white class people. And Georgia and I decided to attend a church that was very multicultural. And we had what we called small group ministry. We called them home groups, homes open for ministry and encouragement. Houston is huge. Traffic is horrendous.
Yep.
People miles and sit in traffic forever. It's got some of the worst traffic in the country. And so we set up this church of about 600 people, set up these little home groups where people would get together in smaller groups and do ministry, do socializing, do Bible study, basically take care of each other, look after each other, get tight with each other. And
mhm,
this community was primarily LGBTQ as well. And in this space, there was a group of Black lesbian couples. So we were drafted, quote unquote, into that. And then there was another group that was just anybody that wanted to join, which was multicultural. Well, back to the Black lesbian couples group. We had a couple come in that wanted to join us. That was one lady was Black, one lady was Hispanic. The Hispanic woman sounded more like a sister than the sister did, if you get where I'm going with this. But she had grew up in South Central Los Angeles and had grew up around nothing but her own people and people, Black people. So she was definitely raised in this urban culture, whereas the Black woman was adopted by a white couple. So yeah, she was dark,
Oh, wow.
but whole demeanor was very different. And do you know the women in my group rejected them and told them that they needed to go join the group that was for interracial couples.
mm,
Michelle went postal on them. I said, "How dare y'all? How dare y'all discriminate against people who want to become a part of who we are? We call ourselves Christian, and y'all reject them for the same nonsense and BS that we've gone through over the years. Are you serious?" And they were mad at me. And we stayed with them, but we started drifting away from them a little bit because it just got so Afrocentric. You're not Black enough. And I'm like, what does that mean? We show
Amen.
we
Hmm.
show up in spaces as who we are, and we can't always control that. There are times when I have to kind of shift my conversation about what I'm talking about, depending on where I'm at. When I lived in Missouri in St. Louis to attend seminary, Georgia and I often really shrink in our spaces and not be quote unquote so Black because it was so racist and so prejudiced there.
mm,
So to adjust to the spaces and the environments we're in. But how we show up, I walk in the room as a Black woman. You may or may not know what my orientation is, but I show up in the room as a Black woman. That's the first reaction of people to me. Not that I'm educated, not that I'm tall, not that I'm a big sister, none of that. I walk in the room as a Black woman. How do you react to that?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
Let's
Michelle,
tell people all the time.
can I ask
Go
that
ahead,
you
Royce.
actually turn your headset off and let's try the computer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we're
Let's
getting
just
some
try the
comments.
computer. I mean, you're using a Mac and they usually do okay with it, so let's give that a shot and see. We've got no. Oh,
I think it may be muted.
yep. You're gonna have to switch your. Okay. It was fine during our pre-show, by the
It
way,
was.
everybody.
Yeah, no
We
problem.
do a test ahead of time, and we were working well. Michelle, you're gonna have to go into the bottom where it says camera and mic, and you're gonna have to select a different mic.
Okay. Nothing
So,
yet.
so Angela, the thing that I'm struck by two things out of that is, number one, code switching is not just black or white. Like there's all these other variations on code switching that I'm hearing from both Michelle and you. You're going. Do you want to go on that?
Well, no, I'm laughing though. So if I'm with my stars, so I'm a member of Zeta Phi Beta sorority, of course,
Yes.
constitutionally bound to Phi Beta Sigma
Yes. Drop that in
fraternity.
there. Let them know.
I had to put that in there. I had to, put the kente cloth in the background. But there's a
Oh my
certain
God.
vernacular I'm going to walk into when I'm with my stars. There's a certain vernacular when I'm with my family. There's a certain vernacular when I'm meeting with the head of Microsoft. And I think for many of us, it's a survival skill. But going back to something Michelle said, like, what is black? What is blackness? What is black enough? The beauty of us is we're so diverse and we come from many different countries and from different even regions here, here. But at the end of the day, my father always told me, no matter how many degrees you get, because I told him, like, I'm going to go all the way to a doctor. He said, just remember, no matter how many you get, somebody is always going to see you as an N-word. Somebody out there. And so I know that when, I'm sitting in my offices as a CEO, and the minute I drive out and I go shopping, I don't get service. I don't, I get tracked all the time because now it's a game for me. And I'm literally sitting there going, I could pay all y'all's minimum wage right now for the whole week, but y'all tracking me. And so that's one of those things. Like, it doesn't matter what shade we are, you got that one drop that hits us. And so, like, why are we buying into this construct we didn't set up? And one of the things I was reading in an article at one point, it said, would colorism exist if white people went away? And the answer to me, as far as I'm concerned, is yes, because our own people continue to perpetuate it.
So
how we treat each other.
But you think colorism would exist outside of the Caucasian community? I agree.
Because we're keeping it going.
So, Michelle, you might we can't hear you. You might put your headphones back on. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I told her
friend.
just use the old mic. Sorry about that. Sorry.
So I just got done reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Got to have a great conversation with TL about it yesterday, and we're going to be releasing that. And anyway, we both just like lit into this thing. But I have a question about that particular, like, would it exist without white people? Well, I guess my first question is, are we assuming that racism disappears if white people do? Because
that's a great question,
right? Because without racism, I'm not sure, because colorism seems to be a part of racism. From my read, I don't know.
But not disappearing and having been created are two different things. It's already created, and we bought into the construct. Now, would it have shown up in the beginning if racism and all those constructs hadn't been created? Now, that's a different question. But now we've bought into it. Even back in the day, like, the paper bag test. Like, Angela, which sorority are you in? You're light enough. You must be an AKA. I mean, those conversations still happen, and I'm almost 50 years old. And so, if that construct hadn't been created back then, would it be an issue now? I don't know. That's a really good question.
Kimberly's comment there is brilliant, by the way, too.
Oh, sorry, I'll bring that up.
Even if we tried to ignore the system wouldn't ignore us, like
Wow.
Michelle said. Because when I walk in the room, as a Black woman. Like,
right.
That's, yeah.
Thanks, Kimberly. Yeah, that's a great comment. It is.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because my fundamental question always still comes down to what is Blackness and what is whiteness. I think, yes, when we walk in the room, people see certain things, but what they see and how they process what they see comes from our conditioning. So one of the things that I try to do just as a person is, one, have a variety of different inputs, but two, like deconstruct things that I know have been constructed around me. We can hear you a little bit more, Reverend
There
Freeman.
it is. Is she back?
Yes, she's back.
Okay.
We can hear you. We can hear you. And so it's fundamentally, it always comes down to that, because I don't see Blackness or whiteness as just the melanin in our skin. It's the war is really between our ears, right? It's how do you deconstruct all the things, because we see certain things and then we have these beliefs around them, or we have these subconscious ways in which we react to things. So one of the things that I try to do is, how do I not become triggered by these things, even though I've acclimated into the system, and I'll even say, I've been highly successful with it. I've learned how to navigate it, right? But it's still something that I'm aware of. So how do we start to, within the people who identify as Native Black Americans, how do we start to deconstruct some of the colorism that exists? I mean, that's the question for everybody, really.
No, that one ain't for me, man.
Well, no, it is. I know you feel that way, but
Nope.
I don't. My views are a little different. I think that I fundamentally believe this, that we won't have real systemic change until Torian, as a heterosexual Native Black American, fights just as hard for injustice and inequality for women as I would the demographic that I'm going to identify with, and vice versa, right? That is how you surround a system of oppression, things of racism. You have to do that. So I'm not one of those people who are like, no, this is just for us. Everything is just for us, and everything is just for them. To me, that's further pockets. Now, it doesn't mean you don't listen to that. It doesn't mean you don't try to understand it. But just being like, for instance, I'm working as an executive coach, and I'm going to shut up because I'm talking way too much. A lot of organizations have ERCs, employee resource groups. Mm-hmm. And they're silos. I mean, these are essentially silos where people can say, hey, how do we go deeper down the rabbit hole of identity, as opposed to how do we find ways to acknowledge what we identify with, but then how do we start to create ways in which we can create new ways in which we identify, whether it be through our values, whether it be through things that we think to be virtuous, or the direction that we're trying to go as a group or as a country or a company. That is the way that I think ultimately you can do it. But I don't think that happens in silos, though. That's it for me today.
No, I don't disagree with my organization. We do have affinity groups, but they're all like my staff of color and my white ally group. And the reason we broke them apart is because the white ally group was like, we feel like we're saying stuff and then we're asking questions, and maybe they're dumb questions to people who've been living this for their entire lives. So we just need some space to talk first and then come back as a group. But we do, in terms of our values, our mission statement, our vision statement, our core work, we come to that and we have a consensus about how we do that work. And I don't often lead by consensus, but this is one place where I try to hear all voices as we're creating that. So I think you can have both and balance, but don't just keep the silos. You've got to bring the whole group together, because all these things we talk about system change, I just keep reminding people systems are basically built with a whole bunch of people. Yes. So you could have all the policies and processes in the world, but if the humans, which are the independent variable in that system, don't make choices to say like, okay, when I do this hiring process, I'm not going to, let my, put my biases around skin tone or whatever help drive this process. That I really have a process that's fair, that's racially just, so that everybody actually has a shot at getting this job. We don't do that right now. Yeah. We say like, oh, we sent that out to the diversity magazines and blah blah blah. We've recruited. I'm talking all the way through the process, all the way down to how you do the interviews, how you ask the questions. You can do that as an organization, but it takes individuals making choices, which is why I told you guys earlier on, I'm trying to be a good ancestor. What does that mean? That means the choices I make now will impact my people when I'm long gone.
And not take the applications that have the names LaQuisha and Benita and Daquan and throw them in the trash
Right?
before you even look at them. That's what happens often,
Often.
especially now with high unemployment numbers, not just because of the pandemic. I'm talking even before the pandemic.
Yeah.
This was going on.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
I heard sisters and brothers in our own circles, in the barbershop, the hair salon, the church, the school, work, say, you know, you need to be careful what you name your child because you could be ruining them for life. And I'm like, really? White women don't have this conversation.
Mm.
No.
Why are we having this conversation? Because the system is rigged against us.
So let me be vulnerable in saying this. I was one of those people who believed that, to be quite honest. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that now, but as a person who figured out how to navigate and really be successful in it, yeah, that there were some things I'm like, okay, in order to move here, I have to code switch. I never really felt like I shrank in environments, but I definitely was very cognizant of, okay, this is how I need to show up because as soon as people start to get threatened, then this could be a threat to the direction that I'm trying to go.
Exactly.
So I'm just being candid and saying I believe that at one point. I have family members. I'm like, yo, if you do that, you could be limiting a lot of opportunities for people. So,
And that's
Right.
what my people think is that one, leaving Houston, taking a call out of state. And I had to be clear with them. I didn't take that call out of that state. Not only did they call me, but God called me there.
mm,
So it was an intentionality in it. Would
mm,
I rather stayed in the South with my people and the kind of food I like and being close to my family members? Of course. Of course. I'm 2,000 miles from my mother and sister who are both post stroke living in a nursing home in
whew,
Austin. Do you know
wow.
how far that is? This wasn't a choice. This was God calling me to this. But I have to look at it from the flip side. But from my people, I'm getting, you're such an Oreo. Really?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
but
really, really.
Yeah.
it's funny. I walk in the room as a 275-pound Black woman. Really? I'm too white? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Mm,
Um,
I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. And I think that's a point that's worth putting a finger on is this is not rational behavior. None of this is. I mean, when we talk about, yeah, a lot of this is built between the ears and we can influence a lot of it. There's one portion here. I'm going to bop my mic. I talk with my hands too much.
you got it.
But there's one portion here that is a basic that we have to address, and that's that we have visual bias built into our brains and built into who we are as human beings because we are primarily visual animals, right? We all
Mhm.
know that's the largest part of the brain
Yep.
dedicated to something
exactly.
is that. And so we have this beautiful ability to see all the variety out there. The problem comes in when we create stories about that variety. And I think this is back to Torian's point, when we create those stories about the variety that that we have to question. Uh, like I sit here, I'm still stuck on the notion of somebody calling you an Oreo, Michelle. Like, I,
I've gotten called that by my own family members, like
Well,
over the
and
past
me
24
too.
months.
And
So I mean,
I have too, Tori, been called that by my own family members. And my brother and I both by my Afro, very, very Afrocentric sister. But having said that, it's interesting because I had a conversation with my cabinet, which is the primarily governing body of my church. My church is somewhere between 2 to 250 people.
mm,
Numbers may be lower now because of COVID. And we were talking about starting having anti-racism discussions, book studies, etc., reading books like White Fragility, Crossing the Lynching Tree, Cast. You get the point. And I stayed silent through all of that conversation as these people were talking back and forth. Of course, I'm the only black on the screen. And then I get a call or a text from a member right afterwards, a white female, and she said, "Can I talk? Do you have a few moments for a chat?" And I said, "Sure." So we talked, and what she wanted to say to me was, "I have a real problem with you leading these discussions. Yes, you're our pastor, but you're a black woman. We should be the ones leading these conversations. You as a black woman should not be showing us how to not be racist towards you." She said, "That's backwards." And a lot of people chimed in with her once the question went out to the whole group. And I'm like, wow, ain't this a flip? Because that would have never happened in my last call. They would have wanted me to do the work. The minute I mentioned white privilege, they almost wanted to lynch me and send me back to the South. So context is everything. But for us to recognize what our part is in attempting, and part of me, the pessimist in me, says things probably are not going to change, but at the very least, maybe we can get to a middle point and not be so evil towards each other about it.
So you mean in regards to colorism within the Native Black American community?
Right. We need to make space for each other as we come to the table.
Exactly.
You know, I live here in Seattle. You know, people have heard about the CHOP. You know, Angela, why aren't you down there protesting? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? I'm like, look, I ain't young anymore. I can't run as fast from flash bombs. So, like, you know, I'm protesting at the policy table. I'm protesting at the philanthropy table. And we need people at the CHOP and protesting and
Yes.
making noise and all of that. But we also need people, you know, pushing reform. And at some point, I need to be teaching those people as they grow to come over and take my place at the policy table. And so it's like, I'm not going to apologize for how I show up
Right.
in my blackness. You know, when I really, you know, continue to look at the, you know, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and he had everything. He had policy people, he had lawyers. So to be able to celebrate, like, we are lawyers, we are doctors, we are politicians, we are teachers, we are rappers, we're neurosurgeons, we're football players, we're basketball players. We are more than we aren't. So
Exactly.
make space. We are
I'm
more
gonna
than we
write that
are.
down.
We're everywhere. That's my T-shirt. You can't take that. These people heard me say it.
You see, I'm writing it down. Like, we are more than we are. All right, all right.
Yeah, I had to tell the former pastor
I
of this
love that.
congregation that I applaud you for protesting, but I can't protest. One, my health doesn't allow it. Two, I don't want COVID. Three, I'm like you. I can't run. I can't walk in this stifling heat. But what I can do with my political science background and my theology background is to sit at the table and have the difficult conversations that none of y'all got time for. You young people can get out there and do the protesting. You know, y'all have more fear, less fear in you than, but I'm an adult. I'm 55. I can't do that no more. But there needs to be people behind the scenes doing the work.
Mm.
And don't assume because I'm a black woman, that's where you really should be. No, I'm where God tells me I need to be. And right
Right.
now, it's leading the charge behind the scenes, going toe to toe with council members, because I can argue all day, going toe to toe with people on the council. You know that policy is racist. Let's rethink it. I can do that all day long. What I can't do is walk around in this 100-degree heat trying to look cute with a collar on, hotter than you know what. I can't do that no more. I just can't. So,
I hear you.
you know, I see a diverse group of young people getting out there and doing the work.
Yeah.
And thank God I got a church that's willing to put up a Black Lives Matter sign, willing to call me as a black woman, willing to allow me to preach the gospel in a way that hopefully liberates my people and makes them stand up and take notice. Look, this is my part in what's happened here.
Yeah.
I had a part in it. But you're right, Angela. There's problems within our own community. We don't always treat each other kindly.
I would say a lot of the times we don't treat each other kindly, and that's one of the things that I've been saying that's been triggering to people. I've said this since the beginning. My message has been the same for 10 plus years, which is we have to internally start a healing process that is intentional and where we are courageously vulnerable enough where we could have these conversations about it without it being so triggering with each other and us being toxic that we can't move forward. And I haven't seen a whole lot of that even right now. And I think that's fundamentally at the heart of real change. And it doesn't seem to be happening enough.
I have a question. Cyril Rack Nichols put a comment on here.
Oh,
Yeah,
if Trump, so he says if Trump wins, and he is going to win, we need to focus on both houses. Trump is a businessman. He wants his own media network. What do we do about reparations and such?
I don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that like on the off show, right? Because I want to go. I want to go back toward how we treat each other and colorism within the Native, because that is important. So, what do you guys think about? And this happens from different sides when people say the only reason this is happening is because we still talk about it. Colorism, racism. What's your response to that comment?
Those faces right there.
I want to hear a narrative around it. I mean, I've heard that a lot.
When I look around, like what I get paid as a CEO, and what my white predecessors and other people get paid as CEOs, and you tell me it's only because I'm thinking about it. I'm sorry, those are true numbers. Numbers never lie. So it's not like we're making it up. It's not that we're just feeling some kind of way. I mean, and I look at data all day long. All day long. That's my job. And Cyril's right. You know, races and power, you know, come together. And so, you know, that's the piece. It's not just some kind of way that we're feeling things. I do a lot of evidence-based work, and part of that is quantitative. Other parts are qualitative. What is actually happening to people out there? And we can see that time and time again in the stories, time and time again. And so how do we, again, go back to, we have to make space. There has to be some reconciliation, healing among ourselves, which is also another big part of this co-op that my friends and I created, is we're going to start with healing us so that we can figure out and move away. Because one of the biggest things when we started this fund is, well, how are those four going to spend the money? And we were like, get away from the scarcity mentality, because we're not stopping at 25 million. That's goal number one. We're going for more. And all these people who want to put equity statements up, in order to not be performative, you're going to have to donate to our fund, and going to show you how we share as a people, which our people were doing long before we were brought over here.
Yes. And
so that wasn't even the question. It's just where I went, because I was feeling that way.
You got it.
Yeah. And then also just this simple point. This country was founded on racism.
Yeah.
Right.
Starting with what happened to the Native Americans and what is still happening to the Native Americans. Having just served in Wisconsin, there's a large Native American population towards the middle part of Wisconsin. They're the Hopi, and I can't think of the other tribe, but it's a huge Ho-Chunk tribe, huge tribe of people. Most of them are being trafficked right now, either labor trafficked or sex trafficked. Right. So we're still doing it. And we can't say that racism is happening because we're talking about it. No, we've been needing to talk about it. What happened to George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and all of that? You know, the major difference between that and what's been happening over the years is that somebody recorded it.
Right. They've been killing us forever.
You know, somebody pulled out a cell phone, which I still forget from time to time. It's a camera. I do. I honestly forget that a lot of times. But a lot of people are pulling it out and filming everything. So you can't do nothing in private no more. But make no mistake, this nonsense has been going on for a while. So the racism has always been there. And
can you pull up Kimberly's comment? Sorry.
Who's comment?
Kimberly Collins Tripp.
Okay.
She makes a good point, but I want to clarify, when I say reconciliation and hurt, I'm talking about ourselves, starting with our Black community. I'm not talking about with white folks, that's a whole other conversation. I'm talking about how we start from ourselves so we can create our own infrastructure that's sustainable for generations, and that we've got some healing to do amongst ourselves, and know that things were done to us, that we were unwilling participants. And how do we heal and move forward as a people, knowing that we won't agree on everything, but what are the agreements we can make and heal around those? So, but you're right, Kimberly, about the racism and microaggressions piece there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I agree.
microaggressions.
I was going to say, and I think you were just answering Cyril's questions there too. Like he had a couple of them that were on point.
Yeah.
And
the thing
you nailed
is, we have to use the Kwanzaa principles, one in particular, cooperative economics. We have to build each other up and not depend on other systems, whether they be white or whatever, to build us up. We can't sit around and wait for other people to help us, because they're not going to automatically do it. That's not the way this country operates. We have to build each other up. And I hear that a lot from my parents who were in their 90s and heard it growing up, that there was always Black-owned businesses in Austin, to where my people didn't have to cross the major intersection to get their goods and services, because it was right there in their neighborhood, owned by one of their people. That has changed.
So I'm a huge fan of Powernomics. Well, it talks about a lot of what you're talking about. Dr. Claude Anderson talks about how the fundamentals of everything everything is centered around economics, and how do you create an economic base that helps to empower. So I encourage all of our viewers, get this book, read it. You don't have to agree with everything in it, but I'm a person who believes, like you said, one, it starts with internal healing, and two, it starts with economics.
Right.
I mean, I also think it's worth pointing out that every time white communities see a problem with, for example, Walmart moving in and small businesses dying, right? And that's something that white communities will talk about. I think one of the ways that white communities, we have to start waking up is every single time we see a problem, we have to know that it's multiplied by 90 for people of color. It's multiplied by 90 for women. It's like the second we see that. So when Walmart devastates a community, yeah, it hurts small businesses. And by saying small businesses, we probably mean white small businesses. But then what did it do to the communities of color, to those small businesses? More than likely, it was even more devastating.
The saying is, when white folks catch a cold, Black folks catch pneumonia.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
I've never heard that. I'm writing that down too.
So here's a question for you. Who benefits from colorism?
It's a great question.
Was it you yesterday, Royce, who told me that this whole thing is a pyramid scheme?
I may have said the American dream is a pyramid scheme. I was stealing that from a meme on Facebook, so it's just not mine. But yes, I may have propagated
it's a good one.
It's the notion of exponential endless growth, and that can't happen. I'm not saying we have to live in a scarcity mindset, but we have an Earth, and this Earth is not endless. It does regenerate. It does grow, like live and move forward and constantly do incredible things and new things. But we can't act like endless growth is the goal. What does sustained growth look like? What does sustainable life look like? And there's, when we talk about, I mean, that was something very prevalent at the protest I went to here in Albuquerque, because the one I went to was run by the Red Nation here. And that was something they constantly mentioned. We didn't have homeless people in our tribes because we were collective, because we operated fundamentally differently. So, yeah.
And then Cyril just brought up something.
Oh, God.
The prison industrial complex.
Yep.
Look at how many, I hate to say it, white people are getting rich off of inmate labor.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like Scott's comment too. It's easier to keep people mad at each other than to see what the wizard really looks like.
Thank you, Scott. That's a great comment. See, I'm with that. I mean, I'm with all of the comments because I like to listen to but that is my thing. It's like, who's behind the scenes that's behind the scenes, right?
I ask that all the time.
That's what I want to know. That's what I want to better understand. Because it seems like even when it comes to politics and getting a lot of feedback around being a centrist. I want to bring all that because to me, it helps bring more data in to say, okay, somebody is benefiting exponentially from division.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
How do we figure out who? Because when you talk to a lot of people, like, you don't have to agree with everything that they say, but I don't know, 70% of people are like, hey, I don't really feel this way, or maybe I haven't done enough, or maybe I don't know how to jump into certain conversations, and I benefited from it. But at the end of the day, as soon as we hear certain triggers and people stop listening, you stop trying to hear, you stop trying to understand, there is a demographic of people, and I'm not saying I know the specifics of who they are, that benefit from that, whether it's colorism and or racism.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's the people at the top,
And
unfortunately, with the money.
But that's how
Cyril,
they kept us down economically in the first place.
Yes.
They didn't let us stay together. They broke our families up when they brought us here so that we couldn't come together.
Yes.
And that's something we've been having to fight for hundreds of years to figure out how we bring ourselves back together as a collective.
Yeah, and then we're separated from our loved ones and get thrown in the system.
well, and there's back to Cyril's point too, like to see the dance here is so he mentions black people make up 13% of the US population, but make up 70%. I'm assuming he's referring to the prison population.
Prison industrial complex.
Even though crimes are committed at localized, when you look at individual demographics, the most crimes committed by 25 to 40 or 45-year-old white men. So let's be real clear here. This is not a representation of who's committing crime. It's a representation of who's going to jail. And then he mentions too continuation of slave labor, because one of the few places slavery is still legal. One of the places slavery is still legal in this country under the 14th Amendment is prisons. So yes, it is. And who benefits? I'm not benefiting. I don't get my paycheck from that shit. Well, I am benefiting in other ways because I'm white. But like, there's the question: have y'all got a check from this? It isn't us.
Well, but it depends. If you
Okay,
and then we're going to switch it back to
Yeah.
colorism because we kind of went off into racism.
Well, we're going.
Which is fine because I think there's a lot of connection. But people who have a stock portfolio benefit from it. I mean, I would challenge people to if you have a 401k, if you have an investment advisor, and they're open to this kind of conversation and digging into it. Look at the diversity of your portfolio, your mutual funds or your REITs and all these different investment tools, and you can find out. But the problem is, and this is what I talk about and work with my clients, is it comes down to how you measure success. And so if people are apathetic, but they're still getting a double-digit return, and they say, hey, I'm not racist, or I'm not a person who believes in colorism, but you're still benefiting from it and being apathetic, you're definitely a part of the problem, period. But the problem is enough people are not digging into that to try to understand it and really trying to recalibrate how do you measure success and how does that play out and how I show up every single day.
So this whole thing, by the way, for me, springs out of the question, who benefits from colorism? What's terrifying to me is
the same people who benefit from racism?
Well, the same.
I mean, that's what's terrifying to me is you've got a community that is tearing at itself, trying to from the outside. What I hear is a community that tears at itself, trying to decide who is black enough to get in, and that the person that benefits from that is pulling the strings on all this over there. Super rich is what Kendi calls them in How to Be an Anti-Racist. Elites is another term that's thrown around, but it's the people who own 85 prisons in the country and operate for-profit prisons or for-profit schools or for-profit, there's a bunch of these.
We don't own the power structure.
So
sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, we got a lot to talk about. We still got the after party, right? We have our after party after this, so we got to kind of close it out. So I would like to hear from you all. More, better, different is really important. Individually, in regards to colorism, how do people show up doing more of what's good or being better, or being different, in your opinion?
What are you asking?
Is that a bad question? I'm sorry.
No.
No. How how do we show up being more, being better, or being different in regard to colorism? So
Oh,
if
okay.
people had to
Okay.
take something from this conversation, what can they do that's actionable, that's different, that creates a better state? I'm just a solutions based person, so as much as I like to
No, I
dig into
get
this,
it.
it's like, how do we move forward so we can make things better?
I start with myself. I have to hold myself accountable. And I
Mm,
mentioned that early on. Um, During this whole pandemic, and I'm tired. We're all tired. We're exhausted for many reasons. George Floyd's murder, Breonna Taylor, like all the things, right? Along with in fighting an invisible virus. Um, and I wanted to stop. And that's where that question of am I being a good ancestor came from. I was
mm,
tired. And I thought, you know what? Somebody had it worse than you and got it to a point where you could sit in the seat you're sitting in. You didn't do this by yourself. So that's cute that you're tired. But if you're building shoulders for somebody else to stand on, what are the choices that I have to make? And that also means holding myself accountable to the colorism that happens in my own family. My parents have been commenting here, but they're also texting, as I mentioned earlier. My dad reminded us that we would joke around and tell my sister, like, you're high yellow.
mm.
She's way lighter than the rest of us in the family. So we have to take care of it first within ourselves. What are we accountable for? And then I also have the ability to control some things in a work environment because I am a CEO. And then my reach. So how far am I extending my reach? How far am I willing to extend my reach to do my part, as people have talked about dismantling the system? Like, forget dismantling, blow the freaking thing up. But
Sound
that's
like
going to take
Royce.
each of us. Well,
So Royce,
we create the
boom.
system. We hold up the system day in and day out.
Mm,
So what are the spaces I control? Each of us controls something, even if it feels like the smallest space. It's that tiny pebble that makes the ripple, right? So what's the ripple you're making? What are you doing, every single one of you who are listening to this, to be a good ancestor every single day, so that it looks different 100 years from now, 200 years from now, when we're long gone? What are you doing?
thank you, Reverend Freeman. Michelle, how do we
Hmm.
show up doing more of the good things, better or different, when it comes to colorism?
Well, I think I lived that through the context of my pastoral call. I show up in a space where people don't look like me. I'm called to pastor and depend on people that don't look like me, but be my authentic self. And we learn from each other how we can move better in a more peaceable union. That's not an easy task. And Angela's right. We're tired right now. I'm exhausted because I haven't slept well in quite a while. And I haven't slept well because there is so much heaviness going on.
Ooh,
But
yes.
it's my responsibility to do all I can to show up authentically every day and show and teach and tell and pastor people to help them understand. Yeah, you see who I am, but do you see inside of my heart? Do
Mm,
you see what goes on the inside, or did you just stop at my
Yeah.
race?
Mm.
mm,
When I lived in Missouri, I feel like they stopped at my race because I was called N word before they could even, before I could even grasp the thought of what was going on. So
mm,
helping people to see that don't look like me, that we're not crazy, we're not all evil, we're not all brutal, our men are not rapists, blah 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 blah. All of those stereotypes, it's all bullshit.
yeah.
The reality is we are human beings.
Mm,
And if I, as a black man, can give Royce my kidney because we're uh, compatible, blood type, and all, that makes us sisters and brothers.
Yeah.
It doesn't make us
yes.
a white man and a black woman. That makes us sisters and brothers.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, fortunately for me, there are a lot of people in my chosen family that don't look like me, but they've had my back through and through. And Royce hasn't seen me for 12 years, yet he remembered me. to come and do this. That says a lot
Awesome.
about how he impacted my life and vice versa. So,
It also says a lot that you said yes, in spite of
my pleasure.
in spite of all of the exhaustion that I know y'all are facing every single day.
I think I saw on Facebook the other day, your black brothers and sisters are tired and hurting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Oh
are.
yeah.
But I don't negate the fact that other people are too that don't look like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I lost 3 people that meant a lot to me to COVID. So, yeah, it's gotten personal, but we still got to continue. And yeah, we're going to be tired, but I look at what my people went through, my parents,
Right, right.
grandparents,
Mm,
my great grandparents. I ain't been through
Yeah.
nothing compared to what they went through.
Yeah.
Not a thing. And because of what they went through, I stand proud now. And I go into spaces where I know I ain't always with, honestly.
Where you are always welcome here on
hell
Where's Your
yeah.
Heart, and we will make sure that we continue this conversation with you guys a little bit later. Stay tuned because we got to come back for after show that won't be televised. But thank you all so much for just showing up vulnerable and talking about and sharing your stories. So just hold on 1 second. We'll put you back in the green room, and then we'll come back together. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So how you feeling, man? That was a
Oh
good
man,
one. That was
I
a
was
good one.
all over the place, honestly. So I'm watching these right as we're like heading toward wrapping up. I see
know.
all these comments going on. I'm
I
like,
know.
oh shit, this is gold.
I
So
know.
first off, Sunny from our last colorism episode
Yep.
piped up here, and she called me on my shit. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to bring her on the show last time, because I'm like, I bring people on here who can call me on my shit too, because I love these people. But she says white folks across the board benefit in the sense that if high percentage of brown and black men are in jail, that's less in academia, in the job market, etc. The benefits not necessarily from a direct check. She's exactly fucking right. And she mentions again, white folks in the fire zones right now are benefiting from inmates that fight fires. So many ways. I also want to shout out to our folks on Twitch. We're on Twitch, by the way. We set up. I forgot we set up Twitch.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Mind Delusion has been chiming in, and this comments about teaching, and he's tracing the path from ignorance to destruction, and just like from Daryl Davis. And so yeah, and Scott's jumping in there, like, yeah, man. And sir, anyway, like y'all, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Keep
Thank
it
you for
up.
the engagement. We appreciate it. Give
You're
us
nailing
topics,
it.
things that you want to hear about. I mean,
Yeah.
as Where's Your Heart is growing, and it is growing exponentially, we want to make sure that we're showing up in service of all our viewers and listeners on a regular basis. So please continue to comment, give us feedback. I've literally gotten 41 text messages since we've been sitting here. I don't know who they're from, but I can't wait to go through this. But thank you. We got to end. We got to bring our guests back. So thank you all. We'll be back next Monday, and talk to you later. That's it.